You know that feeling when you're trying to follow a recipe and you realize a key ingredient or a critical step is just missing? Well, imagine if that recipe was actually a 2,000-year-old sacred law. Today we're going to crack open an ancient mystery, one that's hidden deep inside a religious text, and look at the incredible logical tools that were used to solve it.
So, right there, that's the heart of the problem. What do you do when the instructions are supposed to be divinely inspired, but they're also maddeningly vague? I mean, you can't just guess, and you definitely can't text the author for a quick clarification. This is a really high-stakes puzzle, part culinary, part legal.
Well, the solution came from a group of people we can basically think of as ancient legal detectives. These were the rabbinic scholars of the Talmud. Now, they didn't have DNA evidence or forensics, but they had something just as powerful, this incredibly rigorous system of logic for reading between the lines and filling in the gaps in the text. All right, let's get into it.
Our investigation is going to center on this one specific ritual, which is known as the thanks offering. It's a case full of missing details that, honestly, required some of the sharpest minds of the ancient world to finally crack.
Okay, so here's what the evidence file tells us right from the start. The Bible describes this thanks offering. It involves an animal, sure, but also a whopping 40 loaves of bread. And these aren't just any loaves. They come in 4 totally different varieties, so 10 loaves of each type. These are the basic, undisputed facts of the case.
But this is where it gets tricky, because the text just goes silent. We know the priest who officiates the whole thing is supposed to get a portion of the bread, a special share called a teruma, but the text never says how much. And maybe even more importantly, it leaves out a pretty crucial detail for the baker. How much flour do you need for one of the main types of bread?
First things first, let's try and solve the mystery of the priest's share. This part of the puzzle really depends on figuring out the correct amount for the teruma, that sacred portion.
So, the number one tool these scholars used is a concept called Gezira Shava, which basically means verbal analogy. The idea behind it is actually pretty simple, but it's incredibly powerful. If you find the exact same unique word or phrase in 2 different laws, you can use the details from the law that's super clear to help you understand the one that's a bit fuzzy. It's kind of like finding a key word that links 2 totally separate documents.
The key word here, teruma, also happens to pop up in 2 other important laws. The first one is the law of the tithe, which is very specific. It sets the priest's portion at exactly 1/10. The second is the law of first fruits, which just says a portion should be given but doesn't name an amount. So, which one is the right model to follow?
And this, of course, kicked off a huge logical debate. One side said, look, it's got to be like the tithe, because with both of them, once you give this offering, you're done. No other offerings are required from that same batch. But the other side shot back, no, it's more like first fruits because both offerings have to be eaten in a specific holy place, Jerusalem. Both are really good arguments, right? So we're at a stalemate. So, whenever logic leads to a dead end like this, the detectives start looking for a stronger clue, something more specific. And they find it, right there in the phrasing. The law of the thanks offering says to take from it a teruma. That very precise wording turns out to be the smoking gun.
And this is where that verbal analogy tool just shines. That exact phrase, from it, a teruma, appears in only one other place in the entire legal code, the law of the tithe. It's not in the law of first fruits. This unique verbal link is seen as a direct signpost from the text itself, and it totally breaks the tie and settles the debate.
And just like that, the first part of our mystery is solved. By following that tiny verbal clue, the scholars figured out that the tithe is the correct precedent. The priest's share of the thanks offering is 1 out of every 10 loaves. Case closed. But hey, we're not done yet. We've figured out how many loaves the priest gets, but we still don't know how to actually make them. So let's move on to part 2 of our case, the great flour measurement mystery.
The question now zooms in on those 10 leavened loaves, the only one of the 4 types that has yeast. The text just says to bring bread, but again, it forgets to tell us how much flour is needed for each loaf. So our detectives go right back to their favorite tool.
So they search for the word bread and find it in 2 other famous offerings. First, there's the 2 loaves offering from the holiday of Shavuot, which uses 1/10 of a specific measure of flour, an ephah, for each loaf. Then you have the shewbread from the temple, which calls for double that, 2/10 of an ephah per loaf. So once again, we've got 2 competing recipes.
All right, here we go again. It's time for another round of logical deduction. Which of these 2 breads is a better fit for our thanks offering bread? The scholars start laying out the evidence, comparing the key features of each one.
This table really breaks it down perfectly. You see, the 2 loaves gets a big check mark because it's leavened, which is a strong match, but it gets an X on the grain source.
And the shewbread? It's the total opposite. It's unleavened. That's a clear mismatch. But its grain source is a perfect match. So what does that mean? Yep, another stalemate.
With the logical arguments basically canceling each other out again, the scholars dig deeper, looking for another subtle clue in the text. And they find it in the verse about the 2 loaves offering. The verse says, "From your dwellings you shall bring 2 loaves."
Now those words, "you shall bring," might seem a little extra, maybe even redundant. Why even include them? Well, the scholars see this extra phrase as a teaching moment, a little hint that this specific recipe is meant to be a model. It's like the text is saying, hey, whenever you need to bring a similar kind of offering, use this recipe as your go-to template.
And that subtle little clue is all it takes to close the case. The 2 loaves offering is the right model, which means each of the 10 leavened loaves needs 1/10 of an ephah of flour. Mystery solved.
So, with both of our mysteries finally solved, our legal detectives can put all the pieces of the puzzle together and, for the first time ever, write down the complete, unabridged recipe.
And here it is, the whole shebang. 40 loaves in total. The 10 leavened loaves use 10/10ths of an ephah of flour. The 30 unleavened loaves use the exact same amount, just divided among them. That's a grand total of 2 full ephahs of flour. And the priest's share? Well, it's 1 in 10, which means he gets 4 loaves, 1 from each of the 4 types. Every single detail is now perfectly accounted for.
You know, the recipe itself isn't even the most amazing part of this story. The real takeaway here is the system, the process we just watched unfold. It's a method of interpretation that's designed to build consistency and completeness out of a text that often gives you just the bare minimum. It's literally a way to build an entire legal framework on top of a skeletal foundation.
And all of that leaves us with one final big question. This ancient process of debate and analogy and super close reading was used to solve a 2,000-year-old puzzle. It really makes you wonder, what can this meticulous, careful method of problem solving teach us about how we interpret our own foundational texts today, whether they're legal, constitutional, or even scientific?